when I show videos of the kids to, my friends in the US, they both say that the kids have picked up a little bit of an Australian accent. But yeah, I think I'm figuring out things a little bit. It still feels a little strange sometimes, like sometimes when I'm driving and I'm driving on the other side of the road and I don't pay attention, I catch myself, slightly panicked, just trying to remember if I'm doing the right thing or not.
You've just heard Ho Huynn from Australia National University. Eric had the opportunity to interview Ho Huynn for a second time for this 239th episode of Psych Sessions, Conversations About Teaching and Stuff. Psych Sessions is proud to partner with Macmillan Learning. At Macmillan Learning Psychology, content matters, and these days, digital content matters more than ever. Macmillan Learning's Achieve elevates interactive teaching and learning with an extraordinary range of online course content in a powerful yet easy-to-use platform. Interactive ebooks, innovative assessments, engaging videos and activities, helpful instructor resources. Achieve brings it all together and makes it easy for you to find what you need and what you want. See for yourself. Go to macmillanlearning.com/psych sessions for an introductory tour today. Macmillan's Achieve for Psychology, engaging every student, supporting every instructor, setting the new standard for teaching and learning.
Hi, I'm Bridget Hard, a professor of the practice at Duke University. And I'm a member of STP because it is filled with an incredible community of people who really share my passion for teaching. For me, STP is home. It's a sense of family and friends, people who inspire me, people who give me lots of great ideas for all the different challenges that I face as a teacher. And this community is waiting for you. You can join STP at teachpsych.org.
Welcome to another episode of Psych Sessions, Conversations About Teaching and Stuff. I say this at the beginning of every episode, but you know what? I mean it. We have a very special guest today. This may be the most long-distance guest ever in the history of Psych Sessions. I'm here with Ho Huynn from Australia National University. Did I get any of that correct, Ho?
Yeah, that was perfect. The pronunciation was dead on.
Okay, so I'm going to be honest. So first off, I tell my students all the time, names are important. I really do believe that. Names are important. And so I went back and listened to your original Psych Sessions, and Garth does an intro, and he said your last name, and I wrote it down phonetically so that I could get it right, because I would have probably butchered it in some way.
It was well done, well researched. Yes.
Very good. You're being very kind. So I'm in Boise, Idaho, and I'm sorry I don't know what city you're in Australia.
So it's spelled like Canberra, but the Australians they like to skip things, shorten things. So it's pronounced Canberra.
Really, Canberra?
Yeah, but it's spelled Canberra. Yeah.
And we'll come back to this, I think, maybe at the end, because I think some listeners might find it silly. I'm kind of curious about it. I'm speaking on a Thursday afternoon at 5 p.m. in Boise, Idaho. And Ho, what time is it? And what day is it where you're speaking?
It is Friday morning, 9 o'clock in the morning. So okay. I'm from the future, Eric.
I'm sorry, say that again?
I said, I'm from the future. So if
boy, haven't we known that for a long time?
If there's anything critical you'd like to know, you let me know.
Yeah, I want to know who wins the Thursday night football game on Prime. That's what I want to know. If only it worked that way. I'm gonna leave that alone, because I think I can talk to you for 10 minutes about time zones, and then I'm going to share with you and the listeners a story about New Zealand. I've been to New Zealand in time zone games that I played when I went there. So, which I know is not Australia. I know, what is it? Crossing the ditch. I get it.
That's fair. It's fair.
Yeah. So, how you've been on the podcast before? I'm sure I've asked you a bunch of my standard questions, but let's just start off with how are you doing? How are you doing? How are you doing in a new job I'm assuming a new country? How's your family doing?
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, so we made the move across the pond here. We've been in Australia for almost 2 years now. It feels like we had gotten here just before Christmas in 2023, I guess. Yeah, things are going well. The kids are now 5 and 7, so they were 5 and 3, I guess, when we moved, and so they're getting along just fine. I think when I show videos of the kids to, my friends in the US, they both say that the kids have picked up a little bit of an Australian accent.
That's great.
Yeah. Excuse me. But yeah, I think I'm figuring out things a little bit. It still feels a little strange sometimes, like sometimes when I'm driving and I'm driving on the other side of the road and I don't pay attention, I catch myself, slightly panicked, just trying to remember if I'm doing the right thing or not.
So, how a lot of people in higher ed change jobs. I mean, actually, my first gig as an assistant professor, I was there for 3 years. I changed jobs. Super common, I would say, to change jobs. Little bit less common to leave the continent. And so, to the extent you're comfortable, can you share, like, how much you want to share is up to you. But like, you were at Texas A&M San Antonio, and then did you say, I'm going to leave and I'm looking for a job in a different place? Or was it a purposeful, let's just change our lives up and go to a different country?
Yeah. So I'm happy to share. I think that the biggest driver was sort of our personal motivations to try to bring our kids up. I think in a place that is perhaps a little bit calmer. And so I think so. We've been to Australia maybe a couple of times. I actually proposed to my wife in Australia. She has a sister who married someone in the Australian Air Force. So she had been living over here for 4 or 5 years or something like that. And, to be frank, my wife was pretty kind of down on the state of affairs of the U.S., particularly, raising kids and sending them off to school. And, she said we should move. And so I said, that's crazy. I started by Googling the warmest place in Canada, and that turned out to be Vancouver. The cost of living is quite high. It's apparently pretty rainy there. And then she said, let's look at Australia. And, my initial reaction was, that's just insane. Like there's that's, like we can't just pick up and move to Australia. But then we came back to it. I said, like, let me just try to apply to some jobs, right? Like if I can get one, then we'll seriously revisit it. But otherwise, we're just, talking about hypotheticals, and it really doesn't mean anything to have these conversations. Yeah. So that's kind of how the process started. I applied to a handful of jobs. I applied to a job in Sydney. I applied to a couple of jobs in Melbourne. Those are the two major players. And then there was this random job at the University of the Sunshine Coast. I don't know anything about these universities, but when I Googled it, it was like beautiful sandy beaches. So I applied to that one. And then I applied to this one, which is Australian National University. And yeah, I was fortunate enough to land this one. Yeah.
So, go ahead.
No, that's it.
No, well, I'm going to use a phrase that I think some people might think I'm teasing about, but I'm not teasing, and I follow this advice in my own life. If mama ain't happy, nobody's happy. And seriously, marriages and families are difficult and challenging enough, and so I'm just going to say, good for you both for getting to the same page. And to me, from an outsider looking in, I'm thinking, what an adventure. What an adventure for your family. You could have stayed in the States. You could have moved somewhere in Texas. You could have gone to Vancouver, and it would all have been really safe and familiar and predictable and consistent. And you traded that in for a whole new set of experiences.
APA Publishing wants to give you 15% off your order. If you teach classes like counseling, clinical psychopathology, or multicultural psychology, then this is for you. APA Publishing has books that are written by experts that are grounded in evidence and really help teachers. I'll give you a couple of examples. There's a book they have right now called Helping Skills. It's in its 6th edition, and it gives students clear practical frameworks for understanding and learning counseling techniques. It's perfect for hands-on practice and skill development. Here's another one. Cultural Humility helps students build self-awareness and engage meaningfully across diverse identities and experiences. So head to apa.org because they want to give you 15% off your order today using code PS15. That's capital P, capital S, 15. Go check out APA Publishing.
Yeah, now that we're kind of slowly recovering from our decision, I think. Well, for one, I'll back up and say that we feel incredibly lucky and privileged to be in a position where we can do it. I think we had a lot of support from Amanda's family, particularly. My parents weren't particularly thrilled, but to be able to pick up and go and be able to find a job and walk into security right away, I think is a huge privilege. And because of the timeline, we were able to apply for permanent residency. So essentially, we walked into it with a lot of security. We had a job, we had permanent residency, which means, in Australia, you walk into their healthcare system right away. So it's everything but the ability to vote, right? So, it's a different animal, but we walked into it with a nice, foundation under our feet. So we feel pretty lucky about that.
So
having said that, it's a beast, right, Eric? Like, it's financially, it's crazy. You're spending money on both ends. You're selling your house. You're having we rented the first year, and then we had to buy, and everything, it's rebuying mattresses and rebuying sheets and brooms.
Right.
It's
right.
So, yeah.
It's almost like witness relocation, where you're. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to give you a spit take there, but it's like, yeah, you're right. Who ships a mattress, from the States to Australia? Who ships a car, right? You probably took 16 suitcases, and that was about it.
Well, we got a little container, but a lot of it was like kids' toys and stuff. A lot of kind of sentimental things,
mementos, right?
Yeah, but we gave we had to rebuy cars, and we had to do everything that as one does. But again, we feel quite privileged to be in a position to be able to do some of those things.
So, I'm not overly familiar with the Australian educational system. I know that Great Britain, the undergrad is a little bit different. High school is kind of dramatically different. Could you just help me and our listeners with what is it, a 4-year program? How does higher ed work in Australia?
Yeah, sure. It's undergrad is 3 years, and then for students who are interested, they do an honors year. And so if a good number of students who are interested in that, that's an independent research project. So that takes them through their 4th year. But most students do 3 years, leave. Some students do a 4th year, an honors year. And it turns out that honors year is really, really critical for postgrad or graduate studies. So here, to get into a PhD program, you need to score, they call it top honors, or it's essentially Their grading scheme is also very weird. It's the top grade, which is a high distinction. It's 80 to 100. So it's a wide band for the top grade.
Yeah.
And then after that, it jumps down to 70 to 80, 60 to 70. But that honors year, like in the US, if you just do an undergrad, you don't need to score any particular GPA. Maybe, there's some standards there, but here, if you don't score at the top of your honors class, you can't get into a PhD program.
In Australia. Gotcha.
In Australia, yeah. So turns out students are quite pressured that honors year. And to get into university is also very interesting. From my understanding, like most of high school doesn't really matter until about your last 2 years, where your grades for those last 2 years, plus they do like a standardized test. They call it the ATAR, and that counts for like 50% of your rankings. And then it's just based on that ranking determines whether or not you can go to college or not. So it's very interesting.
How did your mindset adapt? Because I think we think in the States, undergraduate experience has got to be 4 years. We've built curricula for 200 years or longer on the idea that it's a 4-year fall, spring, or quarters or whatever terms. But now you're in a place where the default is 3 years with a bonus year for students who elect to do that. Was it hard to adapt to that, or was it just easy as pie?
I think I'm still adjusting. I think there are some strengths to it. I think in the US system, usually your first or second year, you're not doing courses in your major quite yet. And I think, maybe I'm a bit old school, but I don't take the view that like college is vocational training. I think students really should take the time to learn about the world and, maybe think about their way they see the world, their way of thinking, their way of, gaining information and things like that. So I'm a big fan of, the liberal arts types of education. Here, I think it's very much geared towards a career. So it's shorter, but students in their first and second year are getting a lot of majors courses. And so I think that's an advantage to a certain point, because they get to interact with the things that they think they're interested in. But then I think you miss out on sort of that, the broader education.
Yeah, there's a developmental sequence that we like to tell ourselves, that 18-year-old developing over 4 years and, their brain's still developing and all that good stuff. But there is something attractive to thinking about, what if students could do it in 3? If they can do it in 3, and clearly they are in Australia, I think people think about the cost savings to families, the fewer amount of loans, the quicker you can go into the workforce if that's your desire, or start graduate school. I can see a lot of benefits to it.
Hi, folks. Let's talk about intro psych textbooks. They often tell our students what to learn, but they don't tell them how to learn. And that's why Norton has brought in award-winning teachers like Stephen Chu and Ebony Glover to join Sarah Grisson on the title Psychology in Your Life, with a new emphasis on critical thinking through their Impact Learning Science Framework. Impact is an acronym, and it consists of 6 of the most actionable learning science principles that students need to succeed. And for the first time, these strategies aren't just explained, they're interactive. So as your students are learning course content, they're also practicing skills like monitoring, attending, and thinking critically, using the study tips that feel most helpful to them. And the result is that students don't just learn psychology, they use psychology to succeed in school and in life. And Norton is going to give you a $15 thank you gift if you take 15 minutes to tour around the book. Just head to intropsych.wwnorton.com/psych sessions.
Yeah, I agree. And I think their model over here, students kind of split early on, whether or not they go into university or they go into more vocational training and enter one of the trades. And I think the idea here is generally, like livable wage and things like that. So even if you split off early, career-wise, you tend to do okay from an income perspective. So I don't know. I suppose I can see it both ways. If it were my kids, I would push them to flounder and float, more often. I don't think we need to get people working so early. I think there's a lot of years in your life where you have to work and pay bills, and I don't think we need to rush people into that necessarily.
I think you hit on it. I was 15 years old. I was living in Illinois. Obviously I was living at home with my parents, and there was a local amusement park 7 miles from my house. And I remember I'm 15. I wanted to work, and the working age was 16 unless you got a permit. Well, I pummeled my parents into letting me get a work permit where I could work for $1.65 an hour at Marriott's Great America in Gurnee, Illinois. But I remember my parents saying to me at the time, Eric, you're 15. You're going to work the rest of your life. Why not take one more summer off?
Yeah.
And of course I was, bullheaded and said, no, I want to make $1.65 an hour. Which I did. So that resonates with me, Ho. That idea that it's okay to flounder and explore and change your major. I mean, I talk to people occasionally who are like in the German educational system or the English Great Britain educational system, and they do that same thing where there's that early split where you got to decide if you're going vocational or avocational, and then it's hard to switch gears. It's hard to switch streams after you've made that choice.
Yeah, absolutely. But listen, I think it might just be our American sort of way of thinking. I think they seem perfectly content and they seem to function quite well. So
just because I'm not familiar with the system doesn't mean that it's not working. I'm sure it is, and I'm confident that it is. I'm going to switch gears on you and ask you, what are you teaching this semester?
So I guess I'll give a little bit of context on teaching. So technically our workload is 40-40-20, 40 teaching, 40 research, and 40 service. What that turns out to be is our teaching load is a 1-1, so 1 per semester, and they usually stack it so that folks are teaching a 2-0.
A 2-0. So essentially a teaching sabbatical every other semester.
Well, if you say it that way, which I guess it so
Sorry.
I think that I'm quite fond of teaching.
Yeah.
So my current teaching loads, I teach a second year stats course that's T-tests, ANOVAs. And then part of our contract, we have a contract with a university in China where those students do a 2-2. So they do 2 years at their local university, and then they come 2 years to us, and then they get degrees at both places. And part of that contract is I go there and I teach an intensive 2-week social psych course. So my teaching load usually is a full stats course and then a 2-week intense course in China, and that takes care of my responsibility.
And how many times have you been to China? So first off, this is new information. Thank you for being on the podcast. How many times have you been to China to teach that course?
So I've only finished 1 year's worth of teaching, so I've only been there once, and that was quite the experience as well.
What was that like? I mean, very few Americans get to visit China, much less work in China.
It's sort of been so. I don't know. I guess I just didn't know anything about China, like beyond what I see in the media and on the news and stuff. But yeah, so it's 2 weeks. I went to a city called Chongqing. It's got 32 million people.
God.
And I've never even heard of it, right? It's
right.
The city has more people than all of Australia. Yeah.
I'm sorry, say that part again.
I said the city has more people than all of Australia. Like
And,
this one.
and it's probably much more dense, right? I mean, it doesn't take up the space of Australia, but
Oh yeah, it's high rises. It's high rises all around. It's
32 million people.
it's absolutely insane. But
Holy moly.
things that I was not aware of. Like public transit is amazing. The city is all connected via underground subway. I mean, of course, there are a ton of cars, a lot of EVs that I've never seen before. There's probably a good 10, 15 brands of electric cars that, are Chinese that I've never seen before. But yeah, like I think anything else, when you go to a city, people are pretty excited to kind of show off their cities. It was a very, very lovely experience. But the students there are interesting. Like it's just a lot of it's a lot of kind of,
it sounds fascinating. So I take it from something you said earlier that ANU is a union shop. Would that be fair to say? Because you were talking about a contract.
Yes. So we are we are technically not a part of a union. There is a union, but we have something called, what do they call it? Not a corporation agreement, but there's an agreement across the university for how salaries and raises and things like that work.
Well, like collective bargaining or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. So the teaching is fascinating. You're teaching stats at home. And you're teaching, what was it again? Social psych?
Yeah, social psych.
Social psych abroad.
Yeah.
All right.
And then so this semester, sorry, because I know your question was this semester. So this semester, I'm just teaching a humility seminar. So it's offload. I'm just doing it for my own sort of enjoyment, I suppose. And so we have a group of 9 students, and they read papers every week. They read 3 papers every week, and we get in a room and we talk about them. And yeah, it's
so it sounds like a seminar. And I have a feeling if I was going to translate offload, you meant free.
Yes,
you're teaching it for free.
I know. It's my second time doing it. It's one of those things, like I came from teaching a 3.3 here, and I started my career, I think, teaching a 4.4. So yeah, like teaching is in my blood, and it's something I enjoy quite a bit. So
I can't remember if we had this conversation on the first podcast episode together, but there was a time in my career I dabbled in humility.
Mm-hmm. We have a project using your scale right now.
Oh my gosh, that's shocking that anybody uses the dispositional humility scale.
I think it's a really good one. But by the way, just because you take the perspective that humility is sort of, whether or not you value humility as an indicator of humility, and I think that's an interesting approach. So, anyways,
well, and I will tell you that Bill McKeechee was the guy in my career that inspired humility, because I got to know him a little bit. I heard a bunch of his talks. He was actually on the podcast early on. And plus I have some dear friends like Jane Hallinan who knew him very well when he was alive. And he was just the most humble person I'd ever met. I mean, I'd never heard him brag about anything. I always saw him deflect to other people and give others credit, never took a bow. And it was genuine. I got to know him well enough. It was genuine. It wasn't an act. And it was like, to me, and research wise, this doesn't make sense. To me, he was my operational definition of what it is to be humble. And so I actually developed the scale around his life and looking at things that he did. And that's what I got interested in it. And I took students to conferences and we presented and published a little bit on it. But I actually once, before he passed, he actually took the scale. And so I mailed it to him. He mailed it back to me. He took the scale, and I have it somewhere framed where, this is almost like the answer key, right? If you want to know what humility is, your answers have to match Bill McKeechee and what he did in his career.
Hey everyone, Garth here. Thanks for listening to Psych Sessions. If you could go to wherever you listen to our podcast and you would follow that podcast or like it, it really does help us as we are trying to get out to more teachers of psychology. Also, if you haven't checked out our website, please visit psychsessions.org and sign up for our monthly newsletter. We offer free resources and valuable news that you are going to want to know related to the teaching of psychology. Thanks.
That's so fascinating because, there's this idea that humble people don't rate themselves highly on humility. Like it's a sort of
and I can't remember it. I'd have to find that framed scale with his responses to figure out how he rated himself. But I'm sure you're right. I'm sure he rated himself low. I mean, he wasn't going to brag about anything, even his high level of humility. He wasn't going to take credit for.
That would be interesting to see. I'd be interested to see if that's actually true, because part of the definition is that humble people see themselves pretty accurate. Like they see their
that's right.
Their weaknesses. So I'd be curious to see how those two kind of counter each other and play stuff out.
Yeah, and the one other thing related to humility and Bill McKeachie, and I know I'm supposed to be interviewing you, I'm sorry, but it's just too good not to share with you. Hopefully other people will listen too. He always said he was lucky. I was just lucky. In fact, Jane Hallinan wrote a book chapter where the subtitle was An Interview with Bill McKeachie. I was just lucky. And I got to talk to him about it once, and he wasn't lucky at all. I mean, there were moments of fortune in his life. He just worked his butt off. He worked, but he didn't want to brag. He didn't want to brag about his accomplishments. He didn't want to take a bow. He was using "I was just lucky" as the phrase to acknowledge I've accomplished a lot, and I'm not going to brag about how much I did. And actually, Ho, earlier in our recording here, you used the word luck. We've had a lot of good luck, and I actually didn't stop you for once and correct you that no, there's not a lot of luck there. You worked so hard to achieve what you've achieved. There's moments of good fortune. Anyway, that's my typical rant. I'll stop.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, Eric, but I don't know. Maybe for other people that might not be true, but I think for me in particular, I've been very lucky.
Okay, you want to go here? We'll go here. But the things that you say where you've been very lucky, don't you think you worked hard to get to the place where something good could happen to you or for you? It wasn't random chance that an article got accepted to a journal. It wasn't a random chance that you got an NSF grant. You did good work to get the rewards of that work. It wasn't pity that you got this or you got that or you got promoted. I mean, it's not luck, right?
I think for one, I think the NSF is very random. I think a lot of people work hard, right? Like I
agree.
I think that's probably true. So I think to the extent that I'm, like more deserving than other folks who have also worked hard, and I don't think that's necessarily true.
Well, I didn't say that. I mean, but the things that you've accomplished, I don't think you've accomplished them because you were lucky.
Not entirely. How about that?
Okay. All right. I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. I don't want to back you into a corner. I'm glad you're doing humility research, but you're doing other stuff as well, aren't you?
Yeah. So we right before I left, we got that NSF grant, and we were looking at, sort of the experiences of minority students, particularly Hispanic students. When I was at A&M, it was a very interesting context in that, 3/4 of the students were Hispanic on our campus. And, we had wondered whether or not having sort of their identity be part of the majority would shift sort of some of their identity processes and ultimately how they did at university. And so that was the NSF project, and I'd left, but obviously I continue to stay involved, and our collaborators, we actually just finished up that project. So we're still in the process of writing papers and things.
So like I know that you and I and some of those collaborators are going to have a separate conversation, but can you tell our listeners a little bit about PrEP?
Yes. Absolutely. This is one thing that we're super excited about. I think it's this program that walks undergraduate students through essentially the process of becoming a research assistant, right? Because I think when I was at A&M and other places, every semester we'd sit students down, they go, "Oh, what is research? What do I do? How do I become a research assistant? What are the benefits of being a research assistant?" And so this prep program walks students through all of that from the very beginning, like, what is research? How do I get involved? To, now I'm in a lab. What are some of my expectations? And then how can I leverage this experience to do something beyond that, right? Whether it's graduate school or the workforce. So it's one thing that's come out of the grant that we're like, I'm really, really stoked about. And we hope to get the word out. We hope that people use it. It's completely free, it's hosted on a very, very humble Google sites, but it's heavy with videos from students sharing their experiences, professors sharing their experiences. Yeah, so we hope that it's nice and it's interactive. Professors can assign it. There's a certificate at the end that students can get if they go through the whole program and all of that. Yeah.
Well, and you've shared information with me, and I will be sure to include the bit.ly or the tiny URL in the show notes when this is released. And so if people want to check that out, it's a free resource, been developed by multiple faculty members, and it sounds remarkable. I mean, there are pockets of people who have tried something similar. Even at my own university, at one point we had an RA manual, but I think we just stopped updating it and no one did. I know Karen Knopfel at Georgia Southern a couple of years back did some research about the ethics of what we ask our research assistants to do. And so there are pockets of efforts out there, but it sounds like you've kind of taken all the best and put it in a one-stop shop.
Well, we hope so. Yeah, I think there is a unit on ethics. So yeah, we take both the perspective of, how do you conduct ethical research, but also from Karen's perspective, like, you're a research assistant. Are some of the things you're being asked to do ethical? Is your well-being being looked after, right? And so that's also included in there.
Yeah, it looks like a phenomenal resource. And so just to kind of round out the whole 40-40-20 teaching research service, I assume that your service responsibilities would be roughly parallel to what you did at A&M.
So far, my service responsibilities are pretty light here. I don't want to say that too loudly so people can come knocking on my door.
I believe the word is jinx. You don't want to jinx it.
But right now I sit on the ethics committee, that's our IRB committee.
Sure. And
I've reviewed like low level types of protocols, I think. And then there's a separate committee that deals with the high risk ones. And then right now I'm the interim associate director of culture and well-being for our program. So that's like just programmings and things like that around the well-being space. And that's really it for the university service. And, obviously we count stuff that's out of it, so I serve as an associate editor for a journal, things like that. And that rounds out my service.
All the stuff. Do you have what's your travel like? I mean, you mentioned that you go to China to teach for 2 weeks. If you wanted to go to APA in San Francisco or ACT in Minneapolis, is there support for you to do that? Or do you kind of have to plan carefully because of the expense?
Yeah, so thankfully I got a small kind of startup package when I started here. It's some funds that only last the first 3 years.
Sure.
And then every year I think we get maybe like $2,000 for professional development. And it's fake money. It's Australian money. So it's really less than that. It's like, like 1,200 or something like that USD. I think it covers maybe the tickets. And then after that, so I try to, when I go to SPSP, I try to do it so that I can go see my family and all that stuff at once.
Gotcha. That's your jam? That's your conference, SPSP?
Yes. Yeah, mostly because that's where most of my graduate school friends go.
Very cool.
So yeah.
I know very little about that conference. I know what it stands for. And outside of that, I know they do a bunch of pre-conferences, and there's a teaching pre-conference that our friends at STP participate in and host and organize every year that's held. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that pre-conference. I think I've been going to that one for quite a bit. I think Tyler is running the show now. He's at Kennesaw. Yeah, he used to be.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but he runs a great show. Yeah, I love that pre-conference.
Yeah. So I want to be cognizant of time because it's early in the morning for you. And I also don't want to overuse your time. If you were giving advice to faculty members in the States about relocating, not relocating out of the country, what kind of advice would you give? And I'll also add in there, knowing what you know now and not trying to put you on the spot, would you do it again?
Yeah, so I'll take the second question first. It's absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt in our minds, and I think both. I think professionally, it's been very refreshing. I've never been in sort of this kind of research balance, but really kind of research focused position. And it's different, right? I think the challenges are different, but I think professionally it's been interesting and challenging. And I think personally, moving to Australia, particularly in light of, all that's happening in the US has been really, really great for us. And Canberra is sort of this, like it's sort of this unreal place. Sometimes I feel like it's fake. It's, like I can go for weeks without hearing people honk, like when we're driving, like no one, everyone, it's almost jarring. Like when you go to a place, like I went to New York recently, you get out and it's like, and here really I can drive for weeks and no one honks. Everyone's patient, like people are generally pretty kind, pretty socially conscious. And so, it's a great place for the kids. We feel pretty good about sending them to school and letting them, play outside and all that stuff.
What stereotypes would you like to debunk? Because I know I've got mine. I'm holding them in because I don't want to appear more ignorant than I am. But what stereotypes about Australia did you debunk for yourself, or would you like to debunk for others?
I don't know. I'm not sure if I had, like kangaroos. Yeah, they are everywhere.
Wait. You just can't slip that in and keep going. I believe you said, yeah, kangaroos, they are everywhere. Am I getting that quote right?
Yeah, I mean, not in the city. Occasionally, like a few weeks ago, I dropped my kids off at school and there was a kangaroo just like bouncing around. Very lost, obviously. Should not have been there.
Oh my God.
I go to the gym.
Part of that's going into the title of this episode. I'm sorry.
Sure. I mean, it's it is strange. Like I go to the gym at night. It's sort of on the edge of town, and yeah, the parking lot, kangaroos. Like,
all right. First off, thank you for this.
Yeah.
Would it be analogous to think of the kangaroo in Australia is the deer in the U.S.? Because I'll see deer on the side of the road. If I'm in a wooded area, there's more likely to see deer. I mean, it sounds like, if I'm writing that ACT test question, deer is to the U.S. as kangaroo is to Australia. Is
I think that's totally fair. Yeah, that's fair. Those are the things you got to watch out for when you drive, right?
Okay.
But yeah. So sorry. I don't know.
Don't be sorry. That sounds adorable.
What other stereotypes do you have?
Oh, let's talk about them after we hit stop record. I try to hide my ignorance as much as possible. I think you kind of alluded to it earlier. I think unless you study Australia or any place for that matter, you have the stereotypes from movies. You have the stereotypes from TV shows, which are often, if not almost always, incorrect or unflattering. And I have those. I just don't want to say them out loud, man.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I think to a certain extent, I think stereotypes probably exist for a reason.
Yeah, and I'll circle back to kind of what I started with a little bit. So I had a chance. My buddy Regan Gurung, who you know, did a sabbatical in New Zealand in 2012. He took his family, little kids just like yours, the wife and two kids, and they went and they lived in Auckland. And
Yeah.
it was during the spring semester. And so on my spring break in March, I actually went and I spent a week there. And there's so many stereotypes I had about Australia and New Zealand. Probably one of them is I lump them together, which you really can't do. Because New Zealanders don't like that. They don't. The ones that I hung out with, they did not like that at all. That's why they came up with the phrase "crossing the ditch." We got to cross the ditch if we want to go to Australia, kind of thing. So, but that debunked a whole bunch of things because I was there for a week, and so obviously, and this is why I've been so interested in your experience because you're living it for real. It's different from someone who learns the stereotypes or even visits for a week. It's a little bit different.
Yeah, I would say that one thing that's very different is they're much more conflict avoidant. They don't deal information and news delivery and things like that as directly as Americans do. I think. When I was trying to propose a teaching activity here with a teaching team, and teaching here is I think it's different. There's a lot more like administrative oversight. But I think it took them like 2 or 3 months to tell me one of my ideas was a bad idea. Like they just kind of dance around it. And at some point I was like, guys, we don't have to do this. If it's not, if it's not a good idea, and they're like, if you think you want to go in a different direction, we'll be happy to support you. But it took like 2-3 months just to come to that.
It sounds like they're almost tripping over their own courtesy.
Yes, they're very nice,
and they don't want to offend you, and they didn't want to tell you it was an idea that was going to be rocky or might not work in the classroom. And they keep telling you the things, very nondescript. Well, you can try that if you wanted to.
Yeah. It wasn't even that direct. Yeah. It was, but
I think, don't you think you'd rather be in that environment, or maybe not, I don't know, compared to just being someone slapping you in the face all the time and telling you that there's no effing way that's going to work or whatever.
Yeah. It's and again, it works for them, right? And
right.
It's
there's probably code words. That's what it is. There's code word. There's coded language here. What is the Southern phrase? Oh, bless their heart.
Yeah, bless your heart.
Yeah. Oh, bless your heart. So there's probably coded text there that no one showed you the code book yet, right?
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think that's I'm missing. But Eric, I want to go back to your the first part of your question, which is what are some recommendations or advice I have for folks. I think for one, I think you should do it, and you should just apply and just kind of see their process. I think having been here, I think they're quite keen. They're quite open to having an international perspective, particularly folks trained in the U.S. So the Australian system, their PhD is about 3.5 years. There's no formal coursework, so it's straight PhD project based. So I think there's an implicit understanding that PhDs trained in the U.S. are pretty well trained.
Awesome.
And so I think they tend to be pretty fond of folks from the U.S. Like I can name a good number of colleagues who are trained in the U.S. or have done stints in the U.S. here. So I think they're quite open about that. And there aren't as many universities in Australia. I think there's maybe 42 or something like that total universities. And I didn't know any of this, but there's a group, something called the Group of Eight, which are sort of the big research-based universities. And those folks tend to be particularly open to international candidates.
Gotcha. To me, that sounds like our equivalent of a land grant, the Group of Eight.
Yes.
Yeah. Probably older universities, perhaps with more prestige, or they think they have more prestige, just like land grants do here.
Exactly. So those folks tend, because I applied, I didn't know what I was doing. I applied to, these universities. I interviewed at a different one where they said, essentially, if you were here, we would hire you, but we're not going to pay for your visas and things like that. Whereas the Australian, National University, and I think compared to the other Group of Eights as well, I think they're just more well versed in dealing with international folks. So they weren't as concerned about, bringing someone on from the US. But I was very surprised to have gotten this gig. I think, from the CV perspective and all that stuff, I'm not I don't see myself as a researcher, there. So it's very kind of interesting. So I think, even if you don't see yourself as someone who, I just do it. And I think you'd be surprised.
I think you're giving us a little bit of humility in there, by the way. I just want to add that in. Ho, when you were thinking about us getting together today, was there anything on your mind that you said, oh, I want to talk to Eric about this? I know we're running short on time. Was there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't had a chance to chat about yet?
I don't think so. It was nice to catch up. I think
it's great to catch up.
Yeah, I wanted to share as much as possible behind my decision making, our sort of progress and things like that in Australia. Yeah, so I appreciate the opportunity to be able to do that.
One more question for you, and then I'll let you go. Maybe it's two. Are you still playing volleyball, and are you still coaching volleyball?
Thanks. Yeah, so I still play. I still play beach volleyball. So that's one thing about Australia, that the sports scene is quite active, and it's pretty recreational based. So you can play, you can play well into your 60s, and, it's all skill based. So you can play next to, a 14, 15-year-old person if that's your skill set. So it's very recreational. So I still play sand. My wife and brother and sister-in-law, we have a sand team. And then this year I actually took on and I coached the men's team for our ANU club team. So that was interesting. I've always coached girls, 16, 17-year-old girls. So it was interesting to take on a group of, grown men, like accountants and, high school teachers. And
very cool.
So that was good. That was an interesting experience.
Well, I'm not on Facebook very often, but when I am, that's when I see your volleyball activity, when you occasionally post on Facebook.
Yeah, so I think I'll continue to do that. And I think that's still a relatively big part of my life. And so,
Well, Ho, I know we're up against time. Thank you so much. I know you got a long Friday ahead of you. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me and share stuff with our listeners.